In the year 594 of the Saint calendar, 13-year-old Louis Kirill arrives at Kandria Arcanist Academy to take the entrance exam, and the moment he stands in front of the massive gate, he's completely stunned by the endless crowd of applicants trying to get into the Empire's most prestigious magic school. A few moments later, his foster parents come rushing toward him completely out of breath because Louis got their way too fast, but even while exhausted, his foster mother Lucila, a kind nun, still nervously checks if he brought his ID and dyed his hair properly, so he won't attract attention. Louis calmly tells her not to worry because he came fully prepared, but Lucila still can't hide her fear since people have always treated Louis differently because of his unusual hair color, and she's terrified the other students might look down on him. Julian, Louis's foster father, quickly reassures her, saying magic is the only path that can truly change Louis's future, especially since Kandria Academy is the only place in the Northern Empire where even commoners are allowed to take the exam. This academy was founded by the Kandria royal family, stands among the 10 great academies, and is famous for producing some of the Empire's strongest guardians under the guidance of a legendary Grand Master. In recent years, even several powerful graduates from humble backgrounds came from this place, which is exactly why Julian believes it's the perfect environment for Louis to grow stronger. Hearing that, Louis firmly declares that he will become the next Grand Master, so he can gain enough power to reclaim ownership of the orphanage from the church and protect the family that raised him. His determination instantly makes Lucila emotional, and through tears, she says he's become such a dependable young man. But she also blames herself for being unable to cure the dangerous rampages he suffers from while still forcing him to worry about the orphanage's future. Julian immediately shuts that down, reminding her that she spent years saving abandoned children and giving them a home, and even Louis agrees because, to him, Lucila is the reason he's alive at all. In his previous life, Louis dreamed of becoming the world's greatest fighter, but his severe asthma forced him to live attached to a respirator, and over time, even his own parents began treating him like a burden because of the constant medical costs. Still, despite his weak body, he never abandoned martial arts and eventually became a respected scholar researching combat theory. His work helped revive martial arts across the world, but everything fell apart when another scholar stole his thesis and framed Louis as the thief, mocking him as someone too sick to deserve recognition. In the end, even his parents abandoned him completely after his mother became pregnant again, leaving Louis with only one final wish before death. If he ever got another life, he wanted a healthy body and a family that truly loved him. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in the arms of Lucila, who discovered him abandoned on the streets. Even though people warned her that his strange hair color could bring disaster, she ignored every warning and chose to raise him anyway, giving him the name Louis Kirill. And just like that, Louis finally gained the two things he wanted most, a healthy body and a real family. Back in the present, the peaceful moment suddenly gets ruined when a noble intentionally shoves Lucila to the ground after hearing Louis boldly claim he'll become a Grand Master someday. Louis instantly burns with anger after seeing his mother humiliated, but before he can react, Julian stops him and reminds him to focus on the exam instead of starting trouble. Lucila also gently reminds Louis about the promise he made not to cause problems at the academy, so he forces himself to calm down and apologizes to her immediately. The noble brats clearly aren't satisfied, but they eventually leave to collect their exam numbers. Right after that, the crowd suddenly erupts with excitement as another noble arrives, Kane Aranka, the talented heir of the prestigious Aranka family. And the way everyone praises him like some untouchable genius only makes Louis clench his fists harder because now he's more determined than ever to prove who the real strongest truly is. Lucila looks worried after seeing Louis react so strongly earlier, but Louis quickly reassures her that he's completely fine before confidently declaring once again that he'll become a Grand Master someday. His bold statement instantly catches Kane Aranka's attention, making the noble heir glance back at him, while the same spoiled nobles from before burst out laughing like Louis just told the biggest joke in the world. But Louis doesn't care at all. Instead, he heads toward the academy with a huge grin, silently promising himself that he'll become the strongest so he can protect the precious family that finally gave him a real home. As he runs off, Lucilla can't stop worrying because only 20 or 30 students pass the exam each year. Yet this time, there are over 20,000 applicants competing for those spots. Still, in the end, all she truly wants is for Louis to stay safe. Julian, however, understands Louis better than anyone and says that once Louis decides on something, he charges straight ahead no matter what anyone says, and as his family, their role is simply to support him all the way. Meanwhile, Louis arrives at the massive examination hall and immediately notices that almost every applicant there is much older than him. Before anyone can say anything else, the academy principal, Aronian Smith, suddenly flies down from the sky, instantly stunning the crowd with his overwhelming presence. The students are shocked because the principal himself is a Grand Master, one of the Empire's elite powerhouses. In this world, martial arcanists are divided into 6 major ranks, and reaching Grand Master means standing among the privileged monsters at the top of society. After introducing himself, Aronian announces the first exam. The challenge is simple on paper. Climb the massive staircase guarded by senior students and obtain one of the exam passes placed behind them. Only 1,000 applicants can move on to the next stage, and once the passes are gone, the test immediately ends. The moment the exam begins, countless applicants rush toward the stairs, confidently mocking the test for being too easy. But the instant they start climbing, one of the seniors welcomes them to hell and unleashes an overwhelming aura that instantly knocks many students unconscious without anyone even touching them. The remaining applicants are completely confused, wondering how people are dropping left and right without being attacked. But Louis instantly realizes what's happening. Calmly walking forward, he explains that this isn't a physical attack at all. It's pure killing intent released through aura to crush weak minds with fear alone. Hearing this, the senior student named Sheath confirms Louis is correct and even compliments him for having guts, though his tone clearly shows his disgust toward commoners. That arrogance immediately irritates Louis, and Sheath, who already despises commoners, decides to force Louis onto his knees by releasing even more terrifying killing intent. The pressure becomes so intense that more students collapse instantly, but somehow Louis remains standing completely unfazed. Then he casually mocks Sheath, asking if that's really the best he can do, before confidently saying that while this level of killing intent might terrify ordinary people, it means nothing to someone who has already pushed himself to death countless times. With that, Louis starts climbing the stairs effortlessly while Sheath keeps increasing the pressure with everything he has. Yet Louis's determination never breaks for even a second. Then suddenly, Louis releases his own terrifying killing intent while rushing directly toward Sheath, and the atmosphere instantly freezes as everyone watching gets overwhelmed by the sheer pressure coming from a kid who hasn't even used magic yet. At the very last moment, Louis stops himself before things go too far, leaving the applicants completely stunned by what they just witnessed. He calmly walks past Sheath and grabs an exam pass, but the humiliated senior immediately loses his temper and rushes at Louis from behind. Even then, Louis casually blocks the attack without using magic at all. Before the situation can spiral further, Principal Aronian steps in and orders Sheath to stand down because Louis has officially passed the first exam. Sheath bitterly complains about Louis being a commoner, but the principal immediately shuts him down, declaring that Candria Arcanist Academy treats nobles and commoners equally because in front of monsters, they are all simply human. Hearing that, Sheath reluctantly backs off while Louis respectfully thanks the principal for being fair, but just as things settle down, Aronian suddenly stares at Louis's unusual hair color and quietly remarks that it may become a serious concern. The principal suddenly stares directly into Louis's eyes and quietly asks if his eyes are unusual too, but Louis immediately acts confused like he has no idea what he's talking about. Aronian then places a hand on Louis's shoulder and whispers that if Louis admits the truth, he can personally prepare a special magic potion to hide his unique traits. That instantly makes Louis cautious because the principal clearly knows more than he should, but right now surviving the entrance exam matters more than anything else, so Louis politely avoids the conversation and leaves to prepare for the second test. As he walks away, he passes by Sheath, who looks furious because this was the first time the principal ever stepped in during an exam, and the person he protected was a commoner of all people. Soon, The 1,000 applicants who passed the first stage gather at the academy's second training ground, while the professors tell everyone to wait for further instructions. Standing there quietly, Lewis notices almost every examinee around him is a noble. But even while minding his own business, the same bully nobles from earlier approach him again with disgusting looks on their faces, warning him that nobody will save him next time. One of them even claims Lewis would have been disqualified long ago if the principal hadn't interfered, but instead of getting angry, Lewis just smirks and says a grandmaster clearly has better judgment than a bunch of idiots. The noble instantly realizes he's being mocked and swings at Lewis in anger, but before anyone can react, Lewis calmly strikes the guy's shoulder with 2 fingers, instantly making his arm stop moving properly. Then Lewis follows up with another martial arts technique that sends the bully stumbling backward across the ground, leaving everyone nearby completely stunned. The bully's friends rush over to help him while the injured noble panics after realizing he can barely move his arm, immediately accusing Lewis of using poison and threatening to report him to the administrators. Lewis casually explains that it's not poison at all, it's martial arts, and admits he's been holding himself back because his mother told him not to cause trouble. But honestly, his patience is starting to hit its limit. Furious at the constant harassment, Lewis is about to teach them another lesson when Kane suddenly steps in and tells him that fighting during the exam could get him disqualified. Hearing that, Lewis quietly backs away while one of the noble bullies angrily tells Kane not to interfere in their business. Kane responds with a cold glare and asks if they even know who they're talking to, instantly forcing them to back off. Even though the nobles leave while gritting their teeth in frustration, their leader secretly thinks both nobles and commoners are equally worthless. Meanwhile, Lewis watches Kane from a distance and assumes he's just another noble, using his status however he wants, convincing himself that all nobles are the same. But then Kane walks over and compliments Lewis for being both strong and fearless before suggesting they team up together. The second the nearby students overhear that Kane is looking for teammates, they swarm around him immediately, desperate to join forces with the heir of the prestigious sage Aranka family. Lewis, however, has zero interest in noble politics or alliances, so he simply stays silent. Right then, Principal Aronian appears on stage and congratulates everyone for surviving the willpower test before announcing that the second exam will measure their strength. With a single snap of his fingers, glowing patterns suddenly appear on every examinee's chest, and moments later, an overwhelming weight crashes down onto all of them, making most students struggle just to stay standing. The principal calmly explains that under the effects of his earth magic, they must now reach the stage ahead of them. The students instantly realize they're being forced to move while carrying terrifying pressure from a grandmaster-level spell, and panic spreads everywhere as most of them can barely take a step. But in the middle of all that chaos, Lewis casually walks forward like nothing is even affecting him. Even Kane, who received elite training for years, is shocked while struggling to move under the pressure himself. Lewis reaches the stage first without breaking a sweat, causing the principal to smile as he announces that Lewis has once again become the first examinee to pass the test. The crowd can't believe a commoner managed to outperform every noble twice in a row, especially under pressure strong enough to overwhelm even Kane. After that, the principal deactivates the earth magic and declares that everyone still standing will advance to the next stage. Then countless weapons appear across the arena, and the examinees are told to choose whatever weapon suits them best. Lewis grabs a sword and swings it around effortlessly while many other students struggle just to lift theirs properly. The principal then explains the rules. Anyone who falls outside the stage will be disqualified. Once everyone is ready, he officially starts the exam and orders the professors to release the bound slimes before disappearing instantly, leaving the students completely confused. Most examinees have no idea what bound slimes even are, but Lewis immediately looks toward the sky because he already knows these creatures usually attack from above. Seconds later, small slimes suddenly rain down onto the arena, and despite looking tiny and harmless, they quickly put everyone on edge. The principal's voice echoes through the area as he explains the scoring system. Blocking a slime attack earns 1 point, dodging earns 2, and defeating a slime gives 5 points. Only the top 100 students will move on to the third exam. Hearing this, Many examinees start mocking the slimes for looking weak and goofy, convinced the test will be easy. One student confidently rushes forward hoping for an easy 5 points, but the slime immediately launches itself at him and the battle begins across the entire arena. From above, the principal and the professors quietly observe the chaos while recording everyone's performance. One green-haired professor mentions the talented heirs from the sage families, including the Aranka and Durahan houses, wondering if they'll break new records, while another professor points out the promising commoners, especially Lewis. Hearing that name again, Aronian smiles slightly and says Lewis is a very interesting boy who may end up showing them something truly fascinating. But moments later, one professor notices that Lewis hasn't moved at all since the test started. Meanwhile, while everyone else desperately struggles against the slimes and slowly exhausts themselves, Lewis simply stands there calmly watching everything unfold, causing the other examinees to mock him and say the slimes are obviously too much for a commoner like him to handle after all. One of the slimes suddenly launches itself straight at Lewis, but with a tiny tilt of his head, he dodges so smoothly that the slime flies right past him and crashes into another examinee instead. The students watching are completely stunned because they were sure Lewis was about to get smacked. But before they can even process what happened, another slime rushes forward and knocks down yet another student. Then things get even crazier when 3 slimes charge directly toward Lewis at the same time, making the bully nobles grin confidently because they think there's no way he can dodge all 3. But at that moment, the story flashes back to Lewis's childhood in his hometown, where he drags his confused friends deep into the mountains and asks them to throw rocks at him. His friends hesitate because it sounds insanely dangerous, but after Lewis keeps insisting, they finally start hurling stones at full speed while Lewis calmly watches every movement with intense focus. Back in his previous life, Lewis developed a theory that if he could rapidly transfer information from the brain's parietal lobe to the cerebellum and instantly process attack trajectories, then he should theoretically be able to react to almost anything. To test that theory, he trained himself by calculating the speed, angle, and movement of incoming objects in real time, allowing him to evade every single rock with perfect precision. His friends were absolutely blown away after seeing him avoid everything so effortlessly and immediately asked if he had invented some kind of new martial arts technique. Lewis proudly named it void combat calculation. Back in the present, with the 3 slimes rushing toward him, Lewis calmly activates that same technique, instantly predicting the creature's rebound angles, movement patterns, and attack trajectories. To everyone watching, it looks like he's casually walking through chaos while the slimes completely miss him over and over again. Just like that, Lewis gains 8 points from dodging before immediately following up with a sword technique that wipes out the slimes with ease, finally making Kane pay serious attention to him. Even the professors watching from above are shocked because Lewis isn't just reacting randomly, he's accurately reading the slime's movements like a veteran fighter. Some of them even admit his perception rivals experienced combat specialists. Kane watches Lewis with a huge grin, clearly becoming more interested in him by the second. Another slime suddenly targets Lewis, and just as Lewis prepares to finish it off, Kane jumps in and steals the kill right in front of him, instantly making Lewis glare at him in annoyance. Kane laughs shamelessly and openly admits he did it on purpose before clarifying that unlike the bully nobles, he's not trying to mock Lewis. He then properly introduces himself and asks Lewis if he wants to start stealing points together. Lewis still looks suspicious and clearly doesn't trust him yet, but Kane assures him that he simply wants to place high in the rankings, and while they're at it, he wants to compete against Lewis fairly to see who can earn the most points. More than anything, Kane wants to see Lewis fight seriously. Since Kane seems genuinely confident in his abilities, Lewis finally agrees and confidently says they should make things interesting by adding stakes to the competition. He declares that whoever loses must obey one demand from the winner. Kane immediately accepts with a smile, commenting that Lewis is the first person bold enough to make demands of him. Meanwhile, the bully nobles secretly decide to follow Sheath's orders and take both Lewis and Kane down while the battlefield is still chaotic. Moments later, a slime suddenly rushes toward Lewis and Kane, and the nobles use that distraction to launch a sneak attack from behind. Lewis instantly takes care of the slime, but at the same time, 3 arrows come flying toward them at deadly speed. Kane quickly turns toward Lewis, expecting him to get hit, while the bully nobles grin in satisfaction. But the next second, everyone freezes because Lewis casually catches the arrows with his bare hands like it's nothing. The bully nobles are completely horrified after seeing that insane reaction speed. Kane immediately asks if Lewis is all right, while angrily calling out the nobles for fighting dirty. Hearing that only makes the brown-haired bully even more furious, so he launches another attack using a double arrow spell. Kane calmly destroys 2 incoming arrows with his weapon, but then everyone realizes there's still one last arrow flying straight toward him. The final arrow is flying straight toward Kane, but right before impact, Lewis grabs it with his bare hand and saves him at the last second. Kane immediately looks shocked and asks if Lewis's hand is all right, but Lewis brushes it off and calmly says the attackers were aiming for him the whole time, not Kane. Up above, the professors watching the match instantly realize those nobles attacked with obvious malicious intent, so they ask the principal if the students should be disqualified immediately. But Aronian calmly refuses, saying those fools will lose on their own if they keep acting recklessly, though he still orders the professors to prepare healing potions and promises that punishment will come after the exam ends. Back on the battlefield, Lewis suddenly asks Kane if he has ever heard of baseball, completely confusing him for a second. Then Lewis demonstrates by smacking a slime with his sword like a bat, launching the creature straight toward the brown-haired bully. The slime crashes into him so hard that he gets blasted outside the training ground and instantly disqualified. Kane bursts out laughing and comments that this commoner game is actually pretty interesting. After taking down one enemy, Lewis immediately dashes off to handle the others. The remaining nobles panic after seeing their friend eliminated and quickly turn toward where Lewis was standing, only to realize he's already disappeared. Then suddenly, Lewis drops in from above and sends another slime flying toward them, instantly knocking the second noble out of bounds as well. Now only one bully remains, and when Lewis suddenly appears behind him, the guy completely freezes in fear while desperately trying to threaten Lewis by bringing up powerful seniors. He slowly backs away to create distance, but right at that moment Kane casually sticks his foot behind him, causing the noble to trip, fall out of bounds, and get disqualified too. With all 3 bullies gone, Kane thanks Lewis for saving him earlier and checks on his injured hand again. Lewis confirms he's fine before admitting Kane is surprisingly decent for a noble. As they continue fighting together, Kane explains that Lewis shouldn't lump him together with ordinary nobles because he belongs to the prestigious Aranka family, one of the great families. These clans produced multiple Grand Masters and sages over the years, giving them influence powerful enough to rival even the royal family and the Arcanist Association itself. Hearing that, Lewis realizes not every noble is exactly the same, though he keeps focusing on defeating slimes alongside Kane. Unfortunately, the other nobles watching this unfold are furious seeing a commoner like Lewis dominating the battlefield. So many of them suddenly team up and charge toward him together. The moment Kane notices this, his own followers rush in to defend him with everything they have, instantly turning the exam into total chaos. Lewis and Kane both tense up as the battlefield explodes into a giant free-for-all fight. Seeing the perfect opportunity, a red-haired girl decides to jump into the action too and drags Miliana along with her, determined to crush every noble who ever looked down on them. Meanwhile, Lewis is constantly dodging slime attacks while also avoiding spells and attacks from students targeting him from every direction. Realizing things are getting way too messy, Lewis decides to intentionally lower his score to avoid attracting even more trouble later. At the same time, Miliana begins defeating nobles left and right while the red-haired girl tears through opponents beside her. Then another red-haired student enters the chaos carrying a giant hammer, laughing loudly as he declares beating up people is way more fun than fighting monsters. He immediately starts swinging his massive hammer around like a maniac, smashing opponents out of bounds and disqualifying them one after another. Up above, one professor nervously asks the principal if they should stop the madness before things go too far, especially since so many nobles are getting eliminated. But Aronian calmly says the academy follows its own rules and doesn't care about public opinion or noble status. Eventually, after enough examinees are disqualified, the principal descends onto the battlefield and officially announces the end of the second exam. He explains that the rankings and scores of the successful students will be announced shortly before removing the earth magic affecting the area. Afterward, the senior students begin handing out healing potions to the injured examinees. Lewis drinks one as well, and the injury on his hand heals almost instantly, leaving him genuinely shocked by how effective the potion is, though he immediately starts worrying about how insanely expensive something like this must be. Kane walks over and notices Lewis spacing out, then jokingly reassures him that even if he wins their competition, he won't bully him or anything. Lewis can't help smiling after hearing that. Soon after, Principal Aronian begins announcing the second exam rankings. At first, only ranks up to 6th place are shown, making the nobles smirk confidently because no commoners appear on the list at all. But then the principal reveals that the top 5 examinees all surpassed previous academy records, instantly shocking everyone. He begins announcing the rankings one by one. 5th place goes to Miliana Royce, 4th place to Kane Aranka, and 3rd place to Faye Durahan. Hearing this, Kane suddenly becomes nervous because Lewis's name still hasn't been called, making him wonder if Lewis somehow got disqualified for attacking those nobles earlier. The principal finally announces the 2nd place, and the moment Lewis's name is called with an insane total of 887 points, the entire arena goes dead silent. Even Kane freezes in shock, because it finally clicks for him that Lewis wasn't just strong, he actually placed 2nd, while the surrounding nobles are completely shaken, unable to believe a commoner is sitting above even the prestigious noble candidates. Kane quickly realizes what's going on but doesn't push Lewis for answers, instead casually asking what Lewis wants from him, and Lewis simply says he'll talk about it after the exam. Then the biggest shock drops as the principal announces 1st place, Neil Gunn, with an unprecedented 888 points, barely edging out 2nd place, and Neil himself just smirks and says there are some interesting people here, so he expects them not to disappoint. The nobles are completely losing it at this point, because both top spots are taken by commoners from an orphanage, even placing above Faye Durahan, which leaves Faye visibly irritated and itching for a real fight. Meanwhile, Sheath clicks his tongue in frustration, calling these results a disgrace to nobility, while a green-haired teacher points out how this is unprecedented in the Academy's history, with both top ranks coming from orphanage backgrounds. The principal calmly responds that the Arcanist Association runs orphanages because true strength has never been about social status, then orders all successful examinees to proceed to the next venue. As everyone moves out, Kane asks Lewis if he is actually stronger than Neil, but Lewis gives no clear answer, keeping things uncertain. They arrive at the 3rd training ground, where the final exam is revealed, a survival test called Emblem Battle Royale. Each student is given an emblem, then instantly teleported into a forest, where they must collect as many emblems as possible by any means necessary, and anyone who loses theirs is immediately disqualified, with only the top 10 advancing for admission. Kane tells Lewis they should split up for now since the other nobles will definitely target him, and warns him to be careful. While Lewis already understands this is exactly what the principal wanted by revealing the rankings earlier to spark chaos. The principal then coldly tells them to show everything they've got and survive until the end, and the moment teleportation activates, Lewis finds himself alone in the forest, determined to win no matter what it takes. But that calm doesn't last long, because soon he is surrounded by nobles who still haven't forgiven him for humiliating them earlier, confident that without Kane he is easy prey. Lewis quickly notices he is completely encircled by 3 close-range attackers, while another noble hides in a tree preparing a long-range strike, and he instantly realizes his location was leaked through the teleportation system. Attacks come in fast, but Lewis slips through them with precise dodges, even midair sensing a sudden magical arrow and countering it before landing, unsure of what exactly just hit him. The fight turns into constant close combat as Lewis blocks and counters repeated attacks, while the hidden long-range attacker keeps firing wind arrows that he narrowly avoids, frustrating the group more and more. Even Lewis starts to feel the pressure, realizing he can't fully calculate magic trajectories yet, so he switches tactics and activates Sun No Sun, aiming to counter before the enemy even completes their strike, turning their own momentum against them. When the nobles rush him all at once, Lewis cleanly reverses their attacks and takes down every close-range opponent in one sequence, securing 3 emblems in the process. But the brown-haired noble desperately orders a final full-power attack, only to realize too late that the long-range attacker has already been eliminated by Cain. Panic spreads as Cain appears, having already wiped out their backup and extracted their entire plan, leaving the brown-haired noble trembling in fear. Cain casually confirms he handled them and mocks their weak coordination, while the noble tries to fight back in desperation, only for Cain to smack him down with his own bow, instantly silencing him. Cain then lands beside Lewis and hands him an emblem, calmly saying these low-level nobles who barely learn magic are no threat to him. He then asks Lewis if he wants help, warning that things will only get more troublesome if this continues. But Lewis immediately refuses, insisting he will handle everything himself. Just as that tension settles, a new presence appears, clapping slowly, saying this is exactly what she expected from the man she acknowledged. The mysterious girl finally reveals herself as Faye, a member of one of the great noble families, and without wasting time, she straight-up challenges Lewis to a one-on-one match. Cain immediately recognizes her and explains that she's actually the Grand Master's daughter, which slightly surprises Lewis. Lewis casually asks if Cain is friends with her, but Cain instantly denies it in frustration, calling her a muscle-brained troublemaker, though he admits he has fought her before and lost. Before things can continue, Faye cuts in annoyed, telling them to stop their little chatter and just answer whether Lewis is going to fight or not. Cain quickly tries to de-escalate, warning Lewis that Faye is skilled in magic and already at apprentice level, so it's smarter to ignore her and focus on collecting emblems instead. But that only fires Faye up more, and she mocks them both as cowards who run away the moment they can't win. Cain gets visibly irritated, but unexpectedly, Lewis agrees with her, saying he has actually been wanting to see how fighters from great families operate anyway. That instantly changes the atmosphere as Faye takes stance, declaring she'll fight without magic to keep things fair, and charges straight at Lewis. Instead of dodging, Lewis takes the hit head-on and immediately grabs her spear mid-strike, locking them into a brutal clash. Faye responds by stomping her weapon, triggering a hidden mechanism that extends and shifts the spear into another form, turning the fight even more intense. She goes fully offensive, unleashing her family technique while Lewis smoothly evades every strike like he's reading her movements in real time. From above, the professors watch in shock, commenting that it's been a long time since they've seen the Durahan family spear style in action, praising Faye's flawless speed and power as expected from a genius. One professor even asks what the others think about Lewis, but another immediately shuts it down, insisting a commoner and a great family heir are simply on different levels, confidently predicting Lewis's defeat. Even the principal is asked for an opinion, and he also leans toward Faye winning. Back on the field, Faye increases her pressure with Sacred Lance Rush, but Lewis continues slipping through every attack, frustrating her more and more. Finally spotting an opening, Lewis rushes in to close the distance, but Faye reacts instantly and counters mid-movement, forcing him to jump back just to avoid a clean hit. She even compliments him for dodging everything so far, admitting even Cain couldn't handle her like this. Lewis calmly replies that as long as you observe properly, dodging is not that difficult. Then Faye shifts gears and activates a spear-based magic technique, unleashing Crescent Fall, a terrifying multi-pattern assault. Lewis instantly analyzes it, breaking it down into thrusts, sweeps, defense, and suppression patterns, realizing the combination is deadly at long range but still readable. Even so, he manages to evade everything. Noticing the key weakness of the technique is its close-range vulnerability, meaning if he times it right and closes in, he can turn the fight around instantly. But Faye reads his intention immediately and counters his approach perfectly, forcing him back while bragging that her technique has no weaknesses. She then begins circling the battlefield, her movement twisting like a spinning tornado of pressure, leaving even the professors stunned as they declare her dominance absolute. Still, Lewis doesn't panic and uses a sword net technique to block and redirect her attacks, thinking through another weakness, high stamina consumption, meaning if he survives long enough, an opening will eventually appear. But the constant clashes start damaging his weapon, and cracks begin forming in his sword. Faye suddenly stops and resets distance, and Lewis instantly spots another opening and charges forward. But at that exact moment, his sword completely shatters mid-strike due to accumulated damage. Even Faye acknowledges his insane adaptation, saying it's obvious he was planning a counterattack if his weapon hadn't broken, and Lewis calmly admits she's right, but luck didn't favor him this time. Then Faye points at him and asks why he was holding back earlier. Lewis apologizes, saying it's just a habit to observe first before going all out, but now he confirms he will get serious. Faye glances at his broken weapon and questions how he plans to continue, but Lewis simply says he is better with his fists anyway. He drops into stance, and Faye instantly realizes there are no openings in his posture anymore, signaling the real fight has just begun. She immediately launches her spinning spear technique again, and Kane tenses up, worried Lewis is at a disadvantage against a full-force charge. But in the next instant, Lewis shocks everyone by stepping in and grabbing Faye's spear with both hands mid-attack, completely stopping her momentum and leaving even Faye stunned by what she's just felt. The professors and even the principal are left stunned as Lewis manages to break straight through Faye's penetrating spear rotation, something no one expected a commoner to handle. But Faye is far from done. She kicks her spear upward, flips it mid-air, and catches it again in a seamless motion before re-entering the fight. Then she pulls back and begins circling at high speed, creating multiple afterimages while launching continuous attacks from every angle, turning the battlefield into a blur of pressure and motion. Yet even this isn't enough to break Lewis's defense, as he calmly reads and counters every strike without panic. The principal narrows his eyes, noticing something unusual. Lewis isn't just blocking, he's actually neutralizing the spear's rotation using a strange technique. Even he looks genuinely impressed, admitting it's the first time he has seen something like this. The professors are equally shocked, unable to believe a commoner is overpowering the Durahan family's signature spinning style. One clean exchange forces Faye to retreat and stabilize herself with her spear, clearly frustrated as she demands to know what kind of technique Lewis is using. Lewis simply explains it's a martial method where he adjusts his movement to match and cancel out rotational force, but Faye just stares blankly, not understanding a single word. So Lewis shrugs and tells her to just think of it as that kind of technique before charging in again. Faye immediately responds with spear attacks, but Lewis slips through them effortlessly with light, unpredictable footwork. Kane, watching from the side, rubs his eyes in disbelief, saying Lewis moves like a butterfly drifting through attacks. Even Faye starts getting visibly nervous as Lewis keeps appearing right in front of her, but she still can't land a clean hit. In reality, Lewis is using a refined movement style inspired by a legendary boxer, the butterfly step, a rhythm-based footwork technique that makes his movement nearly impossible to track. With that rhythm, he finally closes the distance and lands a powerful strike that sends Faye flying backward. Kane is completely shocked, and even the principal looks surprised by the sudden shift in momentum. A professor mutters that very few can overpower Faye even without magic, and now they're seriously starting to consider Lewis a genius in close combat. But Faye refuses to stay down. She stands back up, stubbornly declaring that someone from the Durahan family cannot lose so easily. This time she drops her spear entirely and takes a barehanded stance, making Lewis wonder if she's switching to another martial style. Faye suddenly charges in again, forcing Lewis to counter with his own hand-to-hand techniques. But her crushing fist strikes are powerful enough to actually hurt him, something that surprises him for the first time. Lewis even compliments her technique mid-fight, while Faye proudly explains that the Durahan family is not limited to spear arts alone. She then unleashes the third form of crushing hand, increasing the pressure even more, and Lewis responds with boxing techniques, fully matching her intensity as the fight escalates into pure close-range combat. For Lewis, this is exactly what he's always wanted, a real battle against a strong opponent that pushes him to his limits. But suddenly, something changes. His heart starts pounding as a strange voice echoes inside his mind, urging him to keep fighting, pushing further and further. His eyes begin to glow red as his presence shifts completely, his rhythm and style turning sharper and more dangerous. Faye immediately senses something unnatural in him, and her body instinctively locks up from fear, unable to move for a moment. She still manages to block one attack, but the impact sends her flying through the air, crashing into the ground, bouncing back up, and slamming into a tree before finally dropping again. Nearby examinees watching the scene react with anger, unable to accept that a commoner is overwhelming Faye like this, while one of them named Brian suddenly turns pale, shaken by the overwhelming pressure in the air. At that moment, everyone finally realizes something terrifying is happening to Lewis. Sheath completely loses his cool after his plan to eliminate Lewis fails, his frustration boiling over as the situation slips out of his control. Meanwhile, Brian, now injured, panics and tells Sheath to kill Lewis no matter what, insisting they cannot afford to let him survive if even half the rumors about him are true. Back on the battlefield, Lewis suddenly dashes toward Faye again, but she is already heavily injured and barely able to move, leaving her no chance to dodge or counter as Lewis lands another clean hit that sends her flying once more. With his eyes still glowing red, Lewis presses the attack, and for the first time Faye clearly realizes the massive gap between them, understanding that if this continues, she might actually be killed. Desperate to survive, she forces herself to use a martial arcane technique, Blaze Fist, trying to meet his punch head-on, but Lewis completely overwhelms her power and sends her crashing through nearby trees. The impact shakes the ground as Lewis lands, cracking the terrain beneath him, but in the next moment his expression shifts back to normal as he snaps out of that strange state and notices his own injured fist, damaged from Faye's magic. Kane rushes in immediately, asking if he is all right, but Lewis is more concerned about Faye's condition instead. Before anything else can settle, Sheath appears and coldly declares that Lewis has been disqualified because his emblem has been burned, ordering him to leave the training ground immediately. Kane instantly steps in, insisting it was just an accident, but Sheath counters by saying the principal witnessed everything and accuses Kane of trying to help a commoner cheat. He then orders Lewis to leave at once, claiming he is disrupting the exam. The tension spikes again when Faye finally appears, visibly injured but still standing on her own, shocking even Lewis, who thought she might be worse off. Sheath immediately pressures her, asking if she is really willing to defend Lewis even if it costs her disqualification, but Faye shuts him down, saying she already knows her emblem is gone. She calmly walks over to Lewis and apologizes for accidentally using magic during their fight, surprising Kane, who didn't expect her to admit fault so easily. Lewis quickly responds, saying he was the one who lost control earlier, but Faye brushes it off and says it doesn't matter to her since he forced her to use her full power, meaning he technically wins. She even tells him they should have another match once they are both officially enrolled. She scoffs at that, laughing as he points out that Lewis only has 4 emblems left and is already disqualified anyway. But before anyone can react, Faye casually hands all of her emblems over to Lewis, saying it counts as a reward for beating her, instantly boosting his total to 14 emblems. She then turns to Sheath and states that since Lewis's emblem was burned because of her magic, it should still be counted as valid, leaving Sheath furious but completely unable to refute her claim as the situation turns against him. Faye suddenly turns to Kane and bluntly says she cannot accept weaklings passing while stronger people are being eliminated, then walks over to pick up her spear again while pointing out a key flaw in the system. Only 10 people can pass, so what happens if someone at 10th place ends up holding 14 emblems or more? Kane immediately understands her plan, realizing she's trying to secure Lewis a spot in the top 10, and surprisingly agrees with her, even teasing that she can think about things other than just fighting. With that settled, both of them immediately rush off again to continue collecting emblems as the chaos of the exam resumes. At the same time, one of the professors drops down to escort Lewis out of the training ground, confirming his disqualification. Sheath tries to calm himself, telling himself not to overthink the situation, but Brian coldly points out a dangerous possibility. If Faye keeps defeating other examinees and transferring emblems, Lewis might still end up passing. That thought instantly irritates Sheath, because he refuses to accept a commoner like Lewis standing on equal ground with nobles. And in that moment, a darker intention flashes through his mind as he considers making Lewis's elimination look like an accident during the exam. Brian, still watching closely, insists Sheath should take care of Lewis, while also hinting that he better not become like the weaklings who failed, revealing that he seems to know something deeper about Lewis's identity. Meanwhile, outside the third training ground, Lewis calmly hands over all his collected emblems to the professor, accepting his disqualification for now. Even so, he reflects that while martial arts are powerful, they still cannot fully match magic on their own, and he starts thinking that if he can learn how to combine magic and martial arts in this academy, it would perfectly match the future he wants. Later that night, Lewis walks alone outside, still bothered by his torn clothes and worrying about how his foster mother will react, knowing she will definitely panic and start asking questions if he tells her the truth. Suddenly, a figure in black passes by him, and in the next instant that same person attempts to ambush him from behind, but Lewis reacts instantly and counters with a clean kick, stopping the attack cold. The attacker, surprised, asks how Lewis noticed him, but Lewis simply smirks and replies that the killing intent cannot be hidden. Before the situation can settle, two more assassins appear and surround him, making it clear this is a coordinated attack. Lewis immediately realizes these opponents are highly skilled and decides he cannot hold back anymore, also noticing that the most dangerous threat is the assassin hiding in the trees above. Moments later, a yellow-haired assassin strikes from the air while warning Lewis that if he even looks away for a second, his will be taken down. Lewis smoothly shifts into martial arts, weaving through the assassin's attacks with sharp precision before spotting an opening and grabbing one attacker's arm, slamming him hard into the ground. The yellow-haired assassin doesn't slow down and keeps pressing the assault, but every strike gets read and dodged, forcing him to retreat while realizing Lewis's close combat ability matches an apprentice-level fighter far more than expected. Even he admits it out loud, acknowledging that their intel was right about Lewis being dangerous in hand-to-hand combat. Seeing this, the assassin immediately changes tactics and orders the others to switch to magic support. Wind arrows start firing in rapid bursts, and Lewis barely avoids them while activating a breathing technique that circulates his internal energy, boosting his strength, speed, and reaction time to the limit. With his body enhanced, he breaks through the barrage, closing the distance in a flash, then leaps mid-air to grab one target and kicks the yellow-haired assassin cleanly, sending him flying. Despite the chaos, Lewis keeps evading multiple wind arrows at once while the yellow-haired leader commands his team to stop him immediately. Then suddenly, the hidden assassin finally reveals himself from the tree line and lands a heavy kick that shakes Lewis's arm, forcing him to instantly disengage and create distance, realizing this new opponent is on a completely different level. The masked fighter stands silently while the others regroup, surrounding Lewis again and bombarding him with coordinated wind magic. Even with perfect timing, the constant pressure starts wearing Lewis down, and after taking multiple hits, he finally drops to the ground, prompting the assassins to relax and assume he's finished, even commenting that they're exhausted just from fighting him. They start questioning if he's really just a commoner, since he's been more troublesome than most trained apprentices. But unknown to them, Lewis was only pretending to be down. The moment they step closer, he explodes into action, instantly taking down the nearest assassin, then using a stolen bow to eliminate the remaining attackers in one sharp sequence. The masked assassin blocks the counter-attack effortlessly, calmly acknowledging Lewis's clever tactics despite his age. Lewis points the bow at him and coldly asks if he doesn't care that all his subordinates are dead, but the masked assassin simply replies that trash has no value to him. Lewis charges again, but the masked man mirrors his movements and evades everything with ease. Then the assassin forms a massive hammer of energy in his hand, stating that if not for orders, he would have taken Lewis as a disciple. Lewis tries to block the strike, but the impact sends him flying through the air. In an instant, the assassin follows up with an even larger hammer attack, openly stating that Lewis might be above an apprentice level, but against a high-ranked fighter, he doesn't even compare. Lewis attempts to counter, but the difference in power becomes clear as he fails to stop it completely. Even after being slammed again, the assassin presses forward with relentless follow-ups, only to realize something unsettling. Lewis is still alive despite all that damage. Body broken, yet Lewis refuses to fall. The assassin raises his weapon once more, showing no mercy as he declares that even a goddess cannot save him now. unleashing his ultimate martial arcane technique, Celestial Hammer. At that moment, Lewis's resolve explodes as he remembers the people he wants to protect, the family he refuses to lose, and his determination to change his fate. His eyes flare red again as he steps into the attack and meets the hammer head-on with a desperate counter, refusing to die. The impact shocks even the assassin, who realizes his strike was actually neutralized. But Lewis collapses immediately after, barely breathing, lying on the ground in critical condition. The assassin lands and pauses, strangely unsettled, admitting it feels like he is fighting someone on equal footing, finally understanding why Lewis is being targeted and why his existence is so dangerous. Still, he raises his hand again, calling Lewis a monster as he prepares another finishing blow. The moment the assassin's finishing blow is about to land, another force suddenly intercepts it, and Lewis is saved at the last second by a surge of wind magic that pushes the attacker back. Before the assassin can recover, more wind-based attacks rain in from multiple angles, cornering him completely and forcing him to take the full impact without any chance to escape. Watching this unfold, even Lewis is stunned, wondering what kind of situation is this. Then the principal lands right beside him, making it clear that he was the one who intervened. He calmly expresses relief that Lewis managed to suppress the rampage, then immediately orders him to drink a healing potion. As Lewis recovers, the principal turns his attention to the captured assassin and demands to know who ordered him to target an academy examinee. The assassin instantly recognizes him as a grandmaster, but refuses to cooperate and coldly states that even the principal cannot protect Lewis forever. Without hesitation, he suddenly collapses, and before any answers can be obtained, warning that this is only the beginning before collapsing. The principal watches in silence, quietly questioning whether this is the work of the Assassin Guild, though he hopes he is simply overthinking it. Moments later, Lewis stands up after drinking the potion and is shocked by its effectiveness, not only healing external wounds, but even mending fractured bones. Realizing the principal didn't save him by coincidence, Lewis directly asks why he keeps helping him, and the principal simply replies that he will explain everything at his home. Those words immediately remind Lewis of the time, and panic hits him as he realizes his mother must be worried, so he rushes straight back home. The principal calmly calls out to someone named Kylie and orders them to handle the cleanup at the site. Meanwhile, back in the town of Mantia, a group of nobles has surrounded Lucilla, accusing her of misusing funds and blaming her for repairing a strange millstone. But their real intention is clearly to pressure her for their own motives, hiding their harassment behind false accusations. Lucilla tries to explain that she is just waiting for her son, but before things escalate further, Lewis arrives at the perfect moment and kicks one of the nobles straight in the face, sending him flying. Lucilla's relief quickly turns into shock when she sees Lewis covered in blood and his clothes completely torn, but Lewis calmly reassures her that he is fine and lies that he just got caught on a tree during the exam. The injured noble gets back up, even more furious, and threatens Lewis for interfering, warning him that he is picking a fight with a lord. They further threaten to report him to the town's lord, but the atmosphere instantly shifts when the principal arrives behind them. The nobles freeze in shock as they realize they are standing in front of a grand master, and their arrogance disappears in an instant as they hurriedly apologize. The principal simply tells them to send his regards to the lord, and the nobles immediately back off and leave in fear. After they are gone, the principal turns to Lucilla and says there is something they need to discuss. She politely invites him inside their home, where the principal notices the strange millstone still operating on its own without any magic. He also observes that several other objects in the house function in the same unusual way. The principal quietly takes a seat as Lucilla brings him some fruit, and she casually mentions that although she doesn't understand how any of it works, everything was created by Lewis, and thanks to him, their daily life has become much easier. Then, with concern in her voice, she asks if Lewis has caused any trouble during the exam now that the principal has personally come to visit. The principal lets out a calm laugh after hearing Lucilla's concern and confirms that Lewis has achieved results far beyond anything expected, even stating that he has only ever seen this level of talent recorded in the Gaia scripture. He then begins to tell a story from ancient times, when humanity was crushed under the tyranny of monsters, until a single genius appeared among them. Guided by the goddess, that individual awakened the essence of the elements and created martial arcane, a power that changed everything. 5 years later, alongside his companions, he led humanity to victory and wiped out the monsters, saving mankind from extinction, a moment later remembered as Liberation Day when the Saint calendar was born. In the Gaia scripture, that figure is called the first hero. Lucilla reacts with awe, calling the hero a true savior, but Lewis quietly points out that no such hero exists in common folk legends. The principal then drops another revelation, saying the hero is described as a man with black hair, black eyes, and dark features. That immediately shocks Lucilla, who instinctively pulls Lewis closer in fear, while the principal sighs and explains that this truth is known only to the highest ranks of humanity. He reveals that although the hero did save the world, something inside him broke, a madness that took root in his heart, leading him to commit an unforgivable sin, after which all records of him were erased from history, as if that curse-like instability could not be allowed to spread. Hearing this, Lewis quietly realizes how closely it mirrors the strange force he sometimes feels within himself. The principal then stands, explaining that because of this, every nation secretly eliminates individuals born with black hair and black eyes, considering them dangerous from the start, and he gently taps Lewis on the head, asking if he really thought he could fool everyone just by dyeing his hair. Lucilla immediately breaks down in tears, trying to take all the blame on herself while calling Lewis a good boy, but Lewis stops her and calmly says it is fine, because if the principal truly wanted him dead, he would not still be standing here, meaning there must be a reason he was allowed to live. The principal nods in approval, praising Lewis for his sharp judgment despite being only 13, and then goes further, saying that Lewis has not only resisted that inner madness, but has actually begun to control it, something even rare among legends. He declares that this is why he sees Lewis as a potential new hero. Lewis is left speechless as the principal continues, saying the world may look peaceful on the surface, but beneath it, a deep darkness is always stirring. And after witnessing Lewis today, he is starting to think even the old legends might not be so impossible after all, which is why he wants to guide him for the future of humanity. Then the principal casually tosses an apple, which Lewis catches instantly, and reveals that Lewis passed the final test thanks to both his own effort and Kane's involvement, officially granting him admission into the Kandria Arcanist Academy and asking if he would accept his personal instruction. Lewis smirks and asks if the principal is betting on him, even knowing he might lose control one day. And in that instant, the principal's expression sharpens as he slices the apple midair with magic, declaring coldly that if Lewis ever does go berserk, he will personally be the one to kill him. The next day, Lewis's foster brother is overjoyed after hearing that Lewis received a personal invitation from Principal Aronian, treating it like the highest honor imaginable and immediately starting to talk about covering all expenses for him. Lewis calmly confirms it, but makes it clear that this is not the only reason he is leaving. While his brother keeps celebrating, Lewis quietly reflects that yesterday's events felt less like praise and more like a warning, and he starts questioning his connection to the legendary hero, wondering how much of the principal's words he can truly trust. His thoughts drift back to the night before, when after speaking with Lewis's mother, the principal escorted him outside and asked why he allowed her to hear everything. The principal explained that if she stayed ignorant, she would only become a burden, but Lewis immediately rejected the idea of her ever being a burden. However, the principal warned him that once Lewis's true identity is exposed, she could be in danger, so as a mother she needs at least some understanding of the situation, before finally taking off into the sky and telling Lewis to grow stronger because the real trials are only beginning. Returning to the present, Lewis accepts that those words were not wrong. At that moment, his younger sisters rush in after hearing he is leaving, and Lana tearfully asks if he will ever come back home. Lewis gently reassures her that he will return during long breaks because this is still his home, and Lana insists on a pinky promise so he cannot break it. Just then, Lewis is informed that Kane's butler has arrived calling for him, and he heads out to find that Kane has personally invited him to the Harzen Manor. Realizing Kane likely wants to build their connection before academy life begins, Lewis accepts and rides off in the carriage. Upon arriving in Harzan town, he is impressed by the massive estate, openly acknowledging the strength of Kane's noble family. Kane quickly runs out to greet him, excited that they will soon be classmates, and thanks him for helping during the final exam, while casually mentioning their earlier promise, which Lewis agrees to set aside. Kane, however, laughs it off, saying it is a separate matter since Lewis clearly earned his place. As they enter the mansion, Kane explains that he regrets not being able to spar with Lewis during the exam, so he intends to make up for it now before school starts, and also notes that Lewis likely wants more information about the academy. Lewis smiles, but the mood shifts when Kane's mother arrives after hearing the noise and immediately begins interrogating Kane about Lewis. Kane introduces Lewis as his friend, which only angers her further as she insults Lewis and calls their connection a waste of time, insisting Kane should focus solely on becoming a sage like his father. She then coldly accuses Lewis of chasing money and throws a gold ring at him, telling him to sell it and stay away from Kane. Kane immediately apologizes to Lewis, but Lewis quietly picks up the ring and responds calmly that he became Kane's friend because he recognized his potential, then questions whether she thinks Kane's words are worth something so cheap. Enraged, Kane's mother orders the guards to throw him out, but Kane steps in and stops them, defending Lewis by explaining his progress so far. She dismisses it as lies meant to elevate a commoner, but Lewis himself confirms it is true and boldly states that Kane will become even stronger if he stays by his side. That statement pushes her anger even further, but before she can act, a far heavier presence enters the room. Kane's father, William, a grandmaster. He immediately asks Lewis if he truly believes Kane will grow stronger because of him. Kane's mother instantly becomes nervous and tries to flatter William while claiming Kane will never surpass him if Lewis remains involved. But Kane greets his father and Lewis calmly introduces himself as Kane's friend. Lewis is struck by William's overwhelming aura, sensing it is on the same level as the principal. Ignoring the greetings, William focuses on Kane and demands to know if Lewis's statement is true. And under immense pressure, Kane nervously confirms that at the very least Lewis surpasses him. The moment those words are spoken, William releases a crushing wave of killing intent toward Lewis, forcing him to his limit as he realizes in shock that William is not testing him at all, but genuinely intends to kill him. Lewis is honestly shocked by William's terrifying killing intent, just as you'd expect from a grandmaster. But after years of hunting monsters, he's built up a crazy resistance. Instead of backing down, Lewis unleashes his own aura and pushes through William's pressure. Even though William still comes out on top, Lewis only drops to one knee instead of collapsing. Impressed, William asks why he's so desperate to become stronger. Lewis answers without hesitation, saying he wants the strength to protect his family. Hearing that, William immediately turns to Kane and says his son's resolve is far too weak and that he should learn from Lewis. Kane's mother tries to step in, but one glare from William shuts her up instantly. Not wanting to dwell on the awkward moment, Kane invites Lewis to the training grounds. On the way, he apologizes for his parents, but Lewis just brushes it off. Kane explains that his father only respects results, and the only way to earn his approval is through strength. Lewis figures William was testing him because he genuinely cares about his son, even if he has a terrible way of showing it. But Kane can't agree. Ever since he was a kid, his life has been nothing but eating, sleeping, and endless training. William's dream is to raise him into another great sage like his legendary grandfather. So Kane has spent his whole life following orders without complaint, hoping one day his father would finally acknowledge him. To Kane, this mansion feels more like a prison than a home. Every step of his life is controlled. Every noble treats him like some perfect young master, and his talent feels more like chains than a blessing. All he wants is the freedom to fly across the continent like a bird, but in this world, freedom belongs to the strong. That's why he plans to enter the academy, become powerful enough to break those chains, and finally live life on his own terms. Fired up, the two start training together while William watches from afar. His butler reports that Lewis is far from an ordinary kid. During the entrance exam, he used mysterious martial arts never seen before, defeated Faye despite magic being involved, earned the respect of Grandmaster Aronian, and was even protected from the assassin guild by the Grandmaster himself. William smirks and says Lewis sounds like a magnet for trouble. When the butler asks why he allowed Kane to train with someone like that, William calmly replies that trouble attracts danger, and danger is what helps people grow stronger. If Kane stays close to Lewis, he'll grow too. Back at the training ground, Kane attacks with everything he's got, but Lewis easily dodges every strike and points out that while Kane's speed is incredible, all his attacks are too predictable and linear. That gives Lewis an idea. He asks if Kane has ever felt like something was wrong with his fighting style. Kane explains that his family's sword techniques have been passed down for generations, but Lewis says there's another path that suits him much better. Pulling out a dagger, Lewis grins and asks if Kane wants to surprise his father. William notices the two whispering before they suddenly rush straight at him together. The story jumps back a few moments, where Lewis explains that in martial arts, speed is an absolute weapon. Since Kane naturally excels in speed and has wind attribute support magic, forcing himself to master techniques that suited his grandfather makes no sense. In fact, Lewis believes that's exactly why William never surpassed the Grandmaster level himself. He'll find out soon enough. Kane needs to stop copying the past and build a combat style that truly matches his own strengths. When Lewis asks if he's ready to abandon tradition, Kane doesn't hesitate for a second. He says he's nothing like those other noble kids who blindly follow the rules. After teaching Kane an entirely new dagger-based fighting style that perfectly complements wind magic, the two decide to test it against William. Back in the present, they launch a coordinated attack, but William effortlessly slips past every strike. Lewis activates butterfly step and attacks from impossible angles, yet William still avoids everything with ease. Then Kane joins in with wind magic, making their combination attacks even faster, but William continues dodging without breaking a sweat. As the battle continues, Kane suddenly realizes something. His body feels unbelievably light, almost like he's finally flying free. This new fighting style feels natural, and for the first time in his life, he's actually enjoying combat. By combining wind magic with dagger techniques, instead of relying on his family's traditional sword style, he's finally creating a martial art that's truly his own. He charges straight at William, but just before the attack lands, William releases his overwhelming aura and blasts both boys backward. Looking at Kane, William says abandoning the Aranka clan's techniques just to follow his own path is incredibly naive. Even so, Lewis and Kane refuse to give up. They rush in together once again, but William reads every movement. Just as he's about to catch Kane, Kane suddenly retreats to create distance instead of stubbornly pushing forward. William immediately chases after him, but this time Kane remembers Lewis's lesson that retreating isn't weakness. Gathering his courage, he unleashes his own aura, empowers himself with wind magic, and charges back in. Right before their final assault, the story flashes back again to Lewis teaching Kane a baseball technique called the changeup. Instead of relying on raw speed, it's all about changing your tempo to throw your opponent off. Even the smallest movement can become a feint, and once your enemy hesitates for even a split second, your speed becomes twice as deadly. Returning to the fight, William shifts into a defensive stance while dodging their attacks, but then Kane suddenly slows down instead of speeding up. That tiny change completely catches William off guard, and Kane's strike finally lands, barely clipping William's cloak. Seeing an opening, Kane prepares another attack, but William raises his hand and ends the spar. Before walking away, he simply tells Kane not to disgrace the Aranka family. Kane confidently promises that he won't. As William leaves, he quietly admits to himself that the techniques and combat variations Lewis introduced were genuinely fascinating. He never imagined he'd learn something new from a couple of kids. Lewis is a little disappointed since he never got a real chance to push a grandmaster, but Kane couldn't be happier because, for the first time in his life, his father finally acknowledged him. Wanting to repay Lewis, Kane takes him to the Aranka family library. Lewis is completely blown away by the endless shelves packed with valuable books. Kane hands him several rare texts, including one about Kandria's first arcane academy. He explains that it'll teach Lewis the basics of magic theory, mana attributes, and how the academy works. Every new student must undergo a magic awakening ceremony, where they sense elemental affinity through a sacred statue. Kane says he originally awakened at the church temple, where the ceremony costs 10 gold coins. Lewis nearly falls over after hearing that insane price, but Kane laughs and explains it's completely free if you do it through the academy. Of course, tuition, living expenses, and book rentals still cost plenty, although students can cover many of those with academy credits. Kane insists Lewis accept the books and reminds him that if he ever needs help, he can always ask. With that, Kane says the promise between them is finally even. Lewis gladly accepts, but deep down he realizes he'll still need a lot more money before entering the academy. Then a light bulb goes off in his head. If he uses knowledge from his previous life to invent useful products, making money should be easy. Smiling to himself, Lewis asks whether the Aranka family has connections with any merchant guilds. Curious, Kane asks why, but Lewis just grins and says he'll find out soon enough. 1 week later, the entrance ceremony at Kandria's first arcane academy finally arrives, and Lewis couldn't be more excited. As he's looking around campus, a senior student suddenly stops after catching the scent of his cologne. Impressed, she introduces herself as Rose from the 150th class and offers to show him around the academy. Lewis gladly accepts and introduces himself as Louis Kirill. Rose quietly realizes she's never heard that family name before and begins explaining how the academy really works. Ever since the emperor grew old, the imperial heirs, nobles, and great families have been fighting for influence inside the academy. Thanks to Principal Aronian, everything looks peaceful on the surface, but behind the scenes it's an all-out battle for educational resources. Regular students can climb the ranks by earning credits and passing classes, but if someone gets targeted and can't keep up, they'll be expelled without mercy. She warns Lewis to stay alert before asking which political faction his family supports. Right then, Brian walks over and casually reveals that Lewis is actually the commoner who shattered every record during the entrance exam. Rose freezes in shock after hearing he's a commoner, immediately loses interest, and walks away in frustration. Brian tells Lewis not to take it personally because this academy is basically a miniature version of the Empire, and life won't be easy for someone without noble status. Before the conversation can continue, Kane arrives, and Brian politely excuses himself. The moment Brian leaves, his expression completely changes. Curious, Lewis asks about him, and Kane explains that Brian is the Chancellor's son and someone he's known since childhood. Just then, Faye joins them, takes one look at Kane, and says he'll only earn her respect once he becomes as strong as Lewis. The two instantly start arguing again until Faye's friend drags her away before they're late for the ceremony. Once they're alone, Kane hands Lewis a pouch filled with his share of the profits from their business. Lewis is stunned by how much money they made, and the story flashes back a few days earlier when Lewis used knowledge from his previous life to create perfume. Kane loved the fragrance, but doubted anyone would actually pay for it. Lewis simply told him to wait and see. Back in the present, Kane admits he never expected the perfume to sell for such a ridiculous price, and even plans to buy some for his mother. Lewis reminds him to keep the business a secret before the two head over to registration. There, every new student receives an academy credit card, but the noble students immediately begin mocking Lewis for being a commoner. They also blame him for getting Sheath expelled. Confused, Lewis asks Kane what they're talking about, and Kane explains that Sheath was the one who hired the Assassin Guild to eliminate Lewis. Even worse, Sheath has an older brother named Jess who's already studying at the academy. As if on cue, Jess glares straight at Lewis and quietly promises to teach him a lesson. Soon, all the new students gather in the main hall, where Principal Aronian officially welcomes them to the academy. He congratulates everyone for making it this far and encourages them to work hard so they can one day become pillars of the Empire. After that, the student representative, Neil, steps onto the stage. Instead of giving an inspiring speech, he shocks everyone by announcing that his goal is to defeat every single student in the academy. The crowd immediately erupts in anger, but then Neil casually throws his weapon toward Lewis and declares that the person he wants to defeat most is him. Before the situation explodes, Kane steps in and reminds Neil that they're still in the middle of the entrance ceremony. Neil laughs, calls both Kane and Lewis cowards, and keeps provoking them. Furious, Kane is about to attack, but Lewis stops him and tells him to stay calm. Brian suddenly steps in as well, pointing out that Neil and Lewis are both incredibly talented commoners and should cooperate instead of making enemies if they want to survive here. Neil isn't interested in the lecture and tells Brian to get lost because he has no respect for cowards. The surrounding students immediately begin whispering among themselves, while Kane comments that Brian only embarrassed himself because some people refuse to learn until reality hits them. Neil is more than ready to settle everything with a duel, but a professor interrupts and reminds everyone that fighting between students is strictly forbidden outside official classes, exams, and tournaments. Anyone who breaks that rule will be expelled on the spot. Hearing that, Neil simply laughs and walks away, bringing the entrance ceremony to an end. Classes officially begin the next day. Later, Faye scolds Kane for almost causing a huge incident since both of them could have been expelled. She then admits it's partly her own fault because her previous match against Neil ended in a draw, and after Neil learned she had lost to Lewis, he became obsessed with challenging Lewis himself. After saying goodbye, Lewis heads into town to buy supplies, only to discover just how expensive everything is. The shopkeeper explains that most of the items are already discounted, so Lewis settles for the cheapest bed and daily necessities before deciding to send whatever money he has left back to the orphanage. Knowing that magic potions are essential for future training, Lewis realizes he'll need to find an even better way to make money. Later, Faye informs him that the magic awakening ceremony will take place tomorrow, and hearing that gives Lewis another business idea. That evening, Lewis heads to his dormitory to find his room, but along the way he spots several noble students bullying another student. Without wasting a second, Lewis steps in and reminds them that fighting is forbidden. The nobles insist they weren't doing anything wrong, but one of them suddenly swings a punch at Lewis. Using his martial arts, Lewis effortlessly redirects the attack, causing the bully to punch his own friend instead. The poor guy immediately yells, asking why he was hit. Before anyone can react, Lewis redirects another attack, making the same student kick another one of his own friends. Completely confused, the nobles can't figure out what's happening. Lewis seizes the opening, knocks the ringleader to the ground, and ends the fight in seconds. Furious and humiliated, the noble student accuses Lewis of using some kind of magic. Lewis calmly denies it, but the others start calling him a monster instead. Annoyed, Lewis steps forward, but another student stops him, giving the bullies the perfect chance to run away. Once things settle down, Lewis introduces himself and asks for his roommate's name. The boy completely ignores him, but Lewis notices the name on his belongings and learns that his roommate is Kara. Although he's surprised by the cold reception, Lewis decides not to think too much about it since it's already been one crazy first day at the academy. Meanwhile, far away inside a church temple, two mysterious men quietly activate a massive mana circle on the floor, setting the stage for whatever comes next. The next day, all the new students gather at the temple for the long-awaited magic awakening ceremony. Long ago, the goddess Gaia created a world where humans and monsters lived together in peace, but that peace didn't last. Dragons ruled the skies, behemoths dominated the land, krakens controlled the seas, and humanity was pushed to the brink of extinction. Seeing mankind's suffering, Gaia blessed humans with the four elemental powers of water, earth, wind, and fire, giving birth to arcane martial arts. After countless brutal battles, humanity finally defeated the monsters and became the new rulers of the world. Back in the present, the professor tells the students that today they'll receive the goddess's blessing and awaken the true source of their magical power. Lewis quietly notices that, once again, there's still no mention of the first hero. The professor then orders Lewis and Kara to sit on a separate magic circle, explaining that anyone with talent will naturally sense the elements, but those who fail are nothing but useless trash, and the academy has no place for them. As the ceremony begins, Lewis can't help but wonder if this professor has some personal grudge against him. Soon, the magic circles light up, and one by one the students begin awakening their elemental affinities. Some gain fire, others water, while Neil shocks everyone by awakening two elements at once, earth and fire. Smirking at Lewis, Neil confidently says there's no way someone who can't even awaken magic could ever become his rival. Meanwhile, Lewis grows frustrated because he can't sense anything at all. Then he remembers the strange power he felt during his spar with Kane. Something is blocking him, making his mind feel strangely cloudy. Refusing to give up, Lewis pushes his senses to the absolute limit and finally manages to glimpse the surrounding elements. Watching from a distance, the professor is stunned because he secretly placed a special magic circle there to prevent Lewis and Kara from sensing the elements in the first place. Even then, Lewis still can't actually touch them. The professor realizes his spell hasn't failed at all because the confinement circle is still working exactly as intended, blocking the connection between humans and the elements. Satisfied, he secretly vows to eliminate these troublesome commoners from the academy. Hours later, while everyone else has already finished, Lewis and Kara are still struggling as the other students openly mock them. Unlike the others, Kara immediately realizes something is wrong and points out that the magic circle has been tampered with. Without wasting a second, Lewis smashes the floor beneath them and uncovers a hidden magical orb. Kara identifies it as the item disrupting their awakening and urges Lewis to hurry before it's too late. Although Lewis suspects the professor is behind everything, he decides not to dwell on it and focuses entirely on the elements. The moment the interference disappears, Lewis finally awakens, leaving everyone speechless. The professor is horrified, but before he can interfere again, Principal Aronian suddenly appears and calmly orders him to step back. The students are shocked to see the principal in person, while the professor has no choice but to retreat before his scheme is exposed. Outside the temple, he informs his mysterious partner that the plan has failed, but the man simply tells him not to worry because he'll handle everything from here. Meanwhile, Aronian senses that something much bigger is happening behind the scenes. He quietly orders his subordinate Kyle to monitor Sid's movements because he can't allow outsiders to create chaos inside the academy. With that done, Aronian turns his attention back to Lewis, knowing everything now depends on him. As Lewis finally connects with the elements, he remembers asking Cain why humans have to awaken when monsters are born using magic naturally. Cain explained that monsters possess magical crystals from birth, giving them a natural affinity for elemental power. Humans, on the other hand, must first awaken before an element recognizes them, and only then can they manipulate the surrounding mana through years of training. During the ceremony, compatible elements approach the person they choose. Back in the present, a water element drifts toward Lewis. The instant he touches it, a terrifying surge of power floods his body, and he feels the overwhelming presence of the legendary Kraken. Agonizing pain shoots through every part of him, but before he can recover, all four elemental auras suddenly rush toward him at once. The moment Aronian sees what's happening, he realizes this could become a disaster. He instantly creates a massive barrier around Lewis to protect the other students from the overflowing energy. Inside the barrier, Lewis's aura erupts with incredible force, glowing brighter and brighter until the entire temple shakes. Every student stares in disbelief, wondering what they're witnessing. Aronian shouts for Lewis to calm down and get control of the power before it consumes him. After a tense struggle, Lewis finally suppresses the raging energy, although he notices his hair has changed color in the process. Relieved that he didn't lose control, Lewis begins observing the elements more carefully. They remind him of tiny particles constantly moving through the air, and that sparks an idea. If elemental mana behaves like particles, then changing their frequency should allow him to synchronize with all of them. The moment he puts the theory into practice, the impossible happens. Lewis awakens not one, but all four elemental attributes at the same time. A massive vortex of elemental energy forms around him, growing stronger with every passing second. The entire academy is left completely speechless, while Aronian simply watches with a faint smile, saying this is exactly what he expected from Lewis. At the same time, Lewis reaches another unbelievable conclusion. If monsters can naturally use magic because they possess magic crystals, then maybe humans can create one themselves. By harmonizing the movement of elemental particles with the flow of his chi and controlling his breathing, he slowly forces the elemental energy to condense inside his body. Against all odds, it actually works. A brilliant ice crystal forms around him as dazzling blue mana explodes outward, leaving every student frozen in absolute shock and fear at the unbelievable power standing before them. As the newly formed ice crystal begins spreading across the temple, Principal Aronian reacts instantly. raising a powerful flame barrier to stop the freezing energy before it engulfs everyone. His attack collides head-on with Lewis's power, creating a massive shockwave so intense that every teacher in the academy feels it and immediately realizes something unbelievable has happened. As the dust settles, Lewis calmly walks toward the principal. Aronian stares at the strange power surrounding him and asks what kind of element he's using because it feels like ice. Lewis explains that he accelerated the movement of different elements until they fused together, creating a completely new elemental reaction. On top of that, the combined wind and water elements are overflowing through his mana pathways, and he honestly has no idea how to control them yet. Midway through his explanation, Lewis finally notices everyone staring at him and realizes he completely lost control of his mana. He immediately apologizes. Aronian tells his subordinate to take care of the students before bringing Lewis back to his office. There, he congratulates Lewis on successfully awakening all 4 elemental attributes. To prove it, Lewis casually demonstrates each one, leaving Aronian stunned by how smoothly he's controlling them. The principal admits Lewis's talent is beyond extraordinary before handing him a magic textbook to begin studying properly. Since Aronian specializes in wind and earth magic, he tells Lewis to seek guidance from Faye and Miliana if he wants to master fire and water. He then calls in his trusted aide, Kylie, and announces that she'll be responsible for protecting Lewis from now on. Kylie leads them to Aronian's personal training ground, where the walls have been reinforced with earth and wind magic to withstand overwhelming power. Curious, she asks Lewis to demonstrate the mysterious new element again. Lewis explains that he discovered it by accident after increasing the speed of 2 elements until they merged together, creating what he calls the ice element. Both Aronian and Kylie are left speechless. Without another word, Kylie suddenly rushes at Lewis with incredible speed. Lewis calmly blocks every attack and nearly lands a devastating counter before Kylie quickly jumps back to create some distance. She immediately realizes just how dangerous this new element really is. Turning to Aronian, she asks if anyone in history has ever succeeded in fusing 2 elements together. Aronian shakes his head. He explains that countless magical geniuses dedicated their entire lives to researching elemental fusion, yet every single one failed. Most people can only control one attribute, while only a handful awaken multiple elements. Even Lady Mirian, the Empire's strongest mage and the legendary genius of the Eastern region, could only control 3 attributes. She also attempted to fuse elements, but her body couldn't withstand the strain. Humans need both a powerful body and an unbreakable mind to control elemental mana, and accelerating multiple elements at once causes them to clash violently. One mistake could cost someone their life. Hearing all of this, Kylie quietly realizes that Lewis's potential may already rival that of a saint. She immediately ignites her fire element and launches another attack. As they exchange blows, Aronian remembers Lady Mirian's old theory. She believed the only way to safely wield multiple attributes was to either possess a dragon's body or create magic crystals inside the human body just like monsters do. Curious, Lewis asks what became of that research. Aronian sighs and explains it ended in complete failure, was declared forbidden, and eventually disappeared from history. He never imagined someone would actually achieve it. Lewis quietly realizes the reason he survived was because he instinctively circulated each element through separate mana pathways, preventing them from colliding. Kylie warns him not to get carried away because if the truth about his abilities ever becomes public, there's no telling how many powerful people would come after him. That's exactly why Aronian assigned her to protect him. Since she hates unnecessary trouble, she tells Lewis not to draw any more attention to himself. Lewis nods and says he understands. He claims he only awakened the water attribute and that the ice element is simply an advanced application of it. He also explains that his unusually strong willpower lets him control multiple elemental flows. Wanting to test his theory, Lewis asks Kylie to attack him again. As she charges forward, Lewis manipulates water mana, compresses it under immense pressure, and instantly creates a solid wall of ice that completely blocks her attack. Both Kylie and Aronian are stunned. Kylie can't understand how Lewis transformed water into ice so effortlessly. Even stranger, the ice refuses to melt despite being struck by intense heat. yet it's somehow releasing warmth instead of cold. Lewis explains that liquids naturally change state under extreme pressure, so he simply applied that principle to magic. Aronian smiles and tells Lewis to visit his office anytime because he'll personally help him master these powers and uncover even more discoveries. Kylie still isn't convinced and wonders if all of this could just be an unbelievable coincidence since nothing like it exists in any magic textbook. Aronian calmly replies that every great magical discovery was once dismissed as a coincidence before becoming accepted knowledge. Accepting his decision, Kylie officially agrees to protect Lewis. After she leaves, Aronian tells Lewis to get some rest because classes begin tomorrow and hands him a recovery potion before sending him on his way. Back in his dorm, Lewis is amazed by how effective the potion is. His exhaustion disappears completely. When he enters his room, he finds Kara awake. Without saying much, Kara silently hands him a business card from the Gondis Trading Company. Lewis thanks him and points out that helping him could make Kara a target as well. Kara simply thanks Lewis for saving him the previous day, quietly closes the door, and says nothing else. Watching him leave, Lewis realizes that if Kara really is connected to such a major merchant company, that relationship could become incredibly valuable in the future. The next morning, all the students gather at the training hall, where their physical instructor introduces himself as Derek. He's in charge of teaching the fundamentals of martial arcane. The students immediately notice how unusual and energetic he is. Before the lesson begins, Derek invites several senior students to demonstrate the training equipment. As soon as the seniors arrive, they start mocking the noble freshmen who lost to commoners during the entrance exams and promise to show everyone the massive gap between first years and upperclassmen. Derek quickly tells them to stop talking and start demonstrating instead. One senior steps up to the pec deck machine and casually lifts a full ton, leaving the entire class stunned. The other seniors show off equally ridiculous feats of strength, making it clear just how terrifying the academy's standards really are. Derek then tells the freshmen to start training, but warns them not to injure themselves. Most of the new students struggle just to use the equipment, giving the seniors plenty of reasons to laugh at them. Then Lewis casually walks over, grabs the weights, and effortlessly lifts 10 tons before dominating every other training machine, as if it were nothing. The seniors are completely speechless, while Neil watches the unbelievable display with growing frustration, realizing once again that Lewis is on an entirely different level. Then Neil casually walks over and lifts nearly twice as much weight as Lewis, leaving the entire class staring in disbelief. Smirking, Neil challenges Lewis and says they'll soon find out who's actually stronger. Lewis doesn't take the bait, calmly pointing out that today's class is about building strength, not showing off. Flexing in front of everyone proves absolutely nothing. One of the senior students immediately gets irritated and tells both of them not to get so full of themselves. He asks what elemental attributes they awakened. Neil proudly reveals that he possesses both earth and fire, while Lewis simply says he awakened water. The seniors instantly burst into laughter, mocking Lewis for ending up with what they call the weakest attribute. Confused, Lewis asks what's supposedly so weak about water magic. Miliana explains that the water attribute has very few offensive spells and is mainly used for defense and support, which is why most mages look down on it compared to the other elements. Hearing that, the seniors double down on the insults, saying Lewis completely wasted his incredible physical talent and that someone with the water attribute could never become a grandmaster. Kane and Faye immediately step in, telling them to stop talking nonsense. Seeing the argument escalate, one of the seniors turns to instructor Derek and says the best way for first years to improve is through endurance training by taking attacks head-on. According to him, it's the perfect way to strengthen both the body and magical control. He then proposes a spar with Lewis to prove just how useless the water attribute really is. Kane quickly warns Lewis that this senior is Sheath's older brother and is obviously looking for an excuse to seriously injure him. Even so, Lewis accepts without hesitation, saying he doesn't believe any elemental attribute is naturally superior or inferior. Derek agrees to the match and explains the rules. Magic can only be used inside the designated combat area, and dodging attacks is strictly forbidden. At the same time, Neil releases his aura and says he'd like to challenge the seniors as well, But the senior laughs and tells him to wait his turn because he's going to teach Lewis a lesson first. Just before the fight begins, the senior activates his earth magic and covers himself in heavy stone armor. The moment he charges, Neil suddenly cuts in and slams him with a devastating punch that shocks everyone watching. Furious, Sheath's older brother orders the other seniors to attack Neil as well. They rush him together, but Neil calmly blocks every strike before redirecting them into one another. The seniors barely manage to recover and jump back, but they quickly spot another opening. The armored senior sneaks behind Neil and lands what should have been a decisive blow. Instead, the impact shatters the senior's stone armor and badly injures his own hand. Everyone is left speechless when they realize Neil secretly formed armor on his back at the last second to absorb the attack. Even the seniors are stunned by his unbelievable control over magic. Neil immediately follows up with a crushing kick that sends one of the seniors flying and takes him out of the fight. Watching everything unfold, Lewis starts feeling that the situation is getting way out of hand. Without wasting another second, the remaining seniors rush toward Kane, Faye, and the others, but Kane and Faye easily block the incoming attacks. Meanwhile, Lewis finally steps forward to face Sheath's older brother himself, setting the stage for their long-awaited showdown. Jess bursts forward at insane speed and unleashes his strongest attack, but to his complete shock, Lewis blocks it with a solid ice shield. Jess immediately jumps back after realizing just how tough that shield is, and his own hand is left injured from the impact. Lewis calmly explains that it's simply an advanced application of water magic. Miliana watches in amazement, while both the senior and junior students are left stunned because they've never seen water magic used like this before. Jess grits his teeth, thinking this year's freshmen are seriously troublesome, and if things keep going like this, he might actually lose. He suddenly notices Neil defeating one of the seniors and quickly rushes toward him, but Neil wastes no time throwing a punch. Jess dodges with ease and mocks him, telling him to try hitting him again. Fired up, Neil charges with everything he's got, throwing one attack after another, but Jess effortlessly avoids every single strike. Neil's wild attacks nearly hit his own teammates, forcing them to barely dodge in time. At that moment, Sheath's brother steps in front of Lewis, and Neil charges at him too. He backs away at the last second, causing Neil's attack to almost hit Lewis instead. Seeing the perfect opening, Jess instantly launches a powerful kick at Lewis, but Lewis blocks it without flinching and points out that nobles love talking about honor and pride, yet they have no problem attacking by surprise. Jess simply shrugs and says he made the right decision if it helps him win. Now Lewis finds himself facing both Jess and Neil at once. Neil keeps attacking non-stop while Jess joins in with another strike. But right as Jess closes in, Neil accidentally smashes him with a powerful blow that sends him crashing straight into a wall. Without slowing down, Neil rushes Lewis head-on, throwing relentless attacks while Lewis calmly dodges and blocks each one. Watching the fight, Derek is seriously impressed by both of their skills and even starts believing Lewis might one day surpass William. Lewis quickly spots a weakness in Neil's movements and lands a heavy punch. However, the brief distraction gives Neil the chance to grab Lewis's arm, release his aura, and unleash a relentless barrage of attacks from every direction. Annoyed, Lewis says Neil has crossed the line by intentionally trying to seriously injure another student. Lewis finally releases his icy aura, but instead of backing down, Neil gets even more excited. He pushes his own aura to the absolute limit and proudly declares that he'll prove to everyone he's the strongest. Neil remembers growing up fighting monsters in the forest over and over without ever losing. Ever since then, he's wanted only one thing: to become the strongest person in the world. Back in the present, Neil leaps high into the air and comes crashing down with blazing fire magic while Lewis prepares to meet him head-on. But before Neil's attack can connect, Lewis lands a crushing punch that sends him flying. Lewis immediately follows up with another devastating blow, yet Neil somehow endures both attacks and gets right back up. Kane and Faye watch in shock, worried Neil could end up seriously injured if this fight keeps going. Meanwhile, Lewis wonders how he can stop Neil without breaking the Academy's rules. He then unleashes another ice technique and lands a powerful ice-infused punch that finally injures Neil. Even then, Neil refuses to stay down. He reignites his fiery aura, declaring that he won't fall so easily and will keep fighting until the very end. Just as the battle is about to spiral out of control, Kylie suddenly appears and knocks Neil down with a single strike. She immediately tells Derek that he's gone too far this time. Derek apologizes, but Kylie warns him that the students could have been seriously hurt if the duel had continued. Derek replies that he's not an idiot and only wanted to push his students to unlock their true potential. Kylie then reveals that the principal personally ordered her to protect Lewis, telling Derek he should understand exactly what that means. She orders him to report to the principal's office after class before walking away. Watching her leave, Derek smiles and admits this year's students are unbelievably talented, wondering just how powerful they'll become in the future. He then warns Neil that if he ever goes on another rampage, he'll deduct his academy credits. Frustrated that he couldn't even withstand a single attack from a true master, Neil decides he'll get stronger by hunting monsters and earning money at the same time. Derek officially dismisses class, telling the seniors they can leave while the freshmen drink their recovery potions first. Kane can barely contain his excitement as he tells Lewis they just accomplished something legendary. In the Academy's entire history, only 3 freshman classes have ever defeated their seniors, and the most recent one was the class that included Kane's father. One of the seniors apologizes to Jess for losing to freshmen, but Jess tells his teammates not to worry because they fought well. There's no reason to rush, and they'll have plenty of chances to get revenge. No matter how talented Lewis is, he's still just a citizen of the Empire, and the Empire controls everything. Meanwhile, Faye asks Miliana what she thinks about Lewis's incredible techniques and jokes that following him might make her much stronger too. Miliana shakes her head and explains that she can't simply copy what Lewis did because nobody has ever used water magic in such a mysterious way before. Instead, she'll have to discover new offensive techniques for the water element herself. Faye reassures her that she'll figure it out, but Miliana says she has to keep improving for the sake of her family. Faye then calls Lewis over, saying Miliana has something she wants to ask him. The surrounding students instantly get excited, convinced they're about to witness a confession. Lewis walks over and asks what she wanted to talk about. Instead, Faye asks whether Lewis would be willing to teach Miliana the water magic technique he used. Without hesitation, Lewis smiles and says he doesn't mind at all because they're friends. Miliana nervously admits that learning from him might bring him trouble someday and asks if he would regret helping her even then. Lewis tells Miliana not to worry because he would never betray a friend, but she quietly mutters that she doesn't want to drag him into her problems before running away. Faye reassures Lewis that she'll go talk to her, while Lewis realizes everyone is carrying their own burdens and wonders if he might actually be the one causing trouble for others. Curious about Miliana's past, Lewis asks Kane what he knows. Kane explains that Miliana is the daughter of the Royce family and the granddaughter of a grandmaster. While her grandmother was alive, the Royce family was one of the most respected families around, but after her death, their influence slowly disappeared. That's all Kane knows, though he says Faye probably knows more. Lewis then asks Kara, who reveals that the Royce family had a serious conflict with the Arcanist Association, but he doesn't know the details either. With no better answers, Lewis decides he'll eventually ask Miliana or Faye directly. The scene then shifts to the training grounds, where the students meet their new instructor, Professor Sid, who announces that he'll be teaching both magic and martial arcane. The moment class begins, Kane notices Sid glaring at Lewis and asks what's going on. Lewis quietly replies that the professor seems to dislike him for some reason. Right then, Sid walks over, tells them to stop talking and pay attention, and immediately deducts 1 credit from both Kane and Lewis. He warns them that if they keep breaking the rules, their credits will eventually hit 0. Then, just because Lewis doesn't respond the way Sid likes, he deducts another credit from him. Lewis is clearly annoyed, but he forces himself to stay calm. Sid then demonstrates earth magic by summoning a massive stone knight, leaving the entire class stunned. He explains that true martial arcane requires mastering both magic and combat techniques. Students must first learn to manifest their magic power into weapons, then create arcane armor around their bodies. They also need to control magic through both their minds and physical movements before they can fight effectively. After showing the technique, Sid points at the giant stone knight and announces that later everyone will attack it, with the student who deals the most damage earning 5 credits. Before that, He'll teach them how to properly channel magic into attacks. He tells the class to split into groups based on their elemental attributes, though Neil doesn't need a group because he has dual attributes. As everyone separates, several students begin mocking Lewis and Miliana for using the water attribute. Miliana sadly explains that water mages are always forced into support roles, so they rarely even get the chance to attack the statue. At this rate, she'll never become a grandmaster. She quietly says she has to prove herself to someone. Hearing that, Lewis wonders if she's talking about someone from the Arcanist Association. He asks if something is wrong, but Miliana insists it's none of his business. Lewis then asks why she's so obsessed with offensive magic when water is naturally better at supporting allies, disrupting enemies, and protecting teammates. Miliana explains that she wants to become a grandmaster and restore the Royce family. To do that, she has to master both offense and defense. She truly believes the water attribute should have powerful attack magic too. She's already enhanced Aqua Blade with magic potions and even developed multi-hit techniques, but none of it has been enough to overcome water magic's lack of raw offensive power. Just then, another student walks over and asks to spar against her Aqua Shield as a warm-up. Watching the match, Lewis is reminded of his previous life, when everyone mocked him for researching martial arts and constantly told him to give up on his dream. Seeing Miliana fully aware of her weaknesses yet refusing to quit reminds him of Kane's determination, and he realizes he might be able to show her an entirely new path for water magic. Lewis steps forward and reinforces Miliana's Aqua Shield with his own Ice Shield before telling her that he also believes in the limitless potential of the water attribute. He asks her to watch his technique carefully, then turns to Professor Sid and requests permission to attack the Stone Knight himself. Sid smirks and warns him that if he fails to damage the statue, he'll lose even more credits. Assuming Lewis plans to rely on ice magic, Sid questions him, but Lewis shakes his head and says he's discovered a completely different way to increase the offensive power of water magic. The surrounding students burst into laughter, convinced he's about to embarrass himself. Miliana quickly warns him that the statue is reinforced with rare magical ore and advanced earth magic, so ordinary water attacks won't even scratch it, and he'll only lose more credits. Lewis simply smiles and tells her not to worry because he already has a plan. As he walks toward the statue, he remembers an old saying, "Soft overcomes hard." He grabs a handful of sand, compresses it with high-pressure water, and launches it forward with explosive force. The attack slams into the Stone Knight, and to everyone's complete disbelief, the massive statue shatters from a single strike. Even Professor Sid is left speechless, while Lewis smiles confidently and declares, "This is the true power of water magic." Later that day, Kane excitedly tells Lewis that Professor Sid was completely stunned by his attack. The moment class ended, the professor practically ran away. Lewis laughs and admits he was so focused on testing water magic that he didn't even notice Sid's reaction. Kane then reminds him that they should seriously consider Faye's idea, because Miliana is desperately trying to discover a new path for water magic. Faye has been supporting her by constantly buying expensive recovery potions, and during their free time, she even rents private training rooms so Miliana can keep practicing. Kara calculates the total cost at around 350 gold coins, leaving both Lewis and Kane completely speechless. After hearing that, Lewis quietly tells Kara he has a favor to ask. The next day, Derek congratulates the class on how quickly they've improved before announcing their first academy training mission. He explains that this mission will be a chance to grow stronger as they head to the Great Mondo Forest on the western frontier. The forest was once the territory of incredibly powerful monsters, but now it serves as the border between several great nations. The deeper they travel into the forest, the stronger the monsters become. The academy itself was built nearby to help protect the empire from these creatures, and students are regularly sent out to hunt monsters as part of their training. The magic crystals collected from defeated monsters can be exchanged for credits and valuable rewards, while the student who earns the most experience will receive bonus prizes. However, anyone reckless enough to challenge monsters beyond their ability and require rescue from a teacher will lose 1 academy credit. Neil instantly lights up at the mention of monster hunting, while Lewis quietly decides this will be the perfect opportunity to train Miliana through real combat, because people only reveal their true abilities when facing real enemies. Lewis forms a team with Kane, Faye, Miliana, Kara, and the others since their teamwork has already proven reliable, and everyone agrees. Derek then announces that the seniors and first years will complete the mission together. Jess walks over, greets Lewis, and sarcastically tells them to make sure they don't die out there. Lewis confidently smiles back and replies that people only become stronger by overcoming danger. Hearing that, Jess tells his own teammates not to help them under any circumstances since they clearly don't need it. Kane quietly warns Lewis that the seniors might try something once they're deep inside the forest, but Lewis simply tells him everything will be fine. As Jess's group leads the expedition, a massive fighter-class Grand Bear suddenly blocks the path. One of the seniors, Brain, immediately retreats, claiming this level of monster should be easy enough for the freshmen, though he secretly knows just how dangerous it really is and expects Lewis's team to struggle. The bear lets out a deafening roar as the group prepares for battle. Faye attacks head-on with fire magic while Kane rushes behind the monster and lands a solid strike. But to his horror, it doesn't deal any damage at all. The enraged bear immediately swings at him, but Kara fires blazing arrows that force the monster back and save Kane just in time. Instead of stopping it, however, the attack only makes the beast even angrier as it charges straight toward the group. Miliana quickly casts a water spell that halts the monster's movement and shoves it backward, and Lewis is genuinely impressed by her technique. Without wasting another second, he rushes in, channels his water attribute, and defeats the giant bear with a single devastating strike. Miliana is left completely stunned by the sheer power of his water magic. Lewis explains that the technique uses water vapor, creating steam from highly compressed, high-temperature water that explodes inside the target. Even if a monster's skin is incredibly tough, the internal damage is impossible to ignore. Amazed, Miliana asks if she can learn it too. Lewis then hands her the special magic rings he secretly asked Kara to order. With those rings, Miliana can temporarily use earth, fire, and wind magic as well. Since Professor Sid already possesses similar rings, Lewis can now openly use multiple attributes without drawing suspicion. But just as Miliana begins testing the rings, a blazing fire attack suddenly comes flying straight toward her. Miliana reacts just in time, stepping aside and narrowly dodging the incoming fire attack. Everyone is stunned by how powerful the blast was, but before they can catch their breath, they hear heavy footsteps rushing toward them. To their horror, an entire pack of Blaze Kongs charges out of the forest. Kane immediately realizes how bad the situation is and explains that these monsters should never be anywhere near the academy. That can only mean the other students are in danger too. Thankfully, the teachers are already rushing around the battlefield to protect as many students as possible. Neil, on the other hand, gets fired up, thrilled at the chance to fight such powerful monsters. Suddenly, one of the Blaze Kongs slams into Brain. Even with his arcane armor activated, he's defeated in a single hit. As the monster prepares to finish him off, Lewis jumps in and sends it flying with a devastating kick. He immediately orders Kara and Miliana to help the upperclassmen and retreat. Miliana hesitates, worried about leaving him behind, but Faye tells her they'll catch up soon and urges her to go. Another Blaze Kong instantly attacks, forcing Lewis to shout for everyone to dodge, and they barely escape in time. Kane realizes they have no choice but to fight together. He unleashes a wind spell that injures one monster's arm, creating the opening Faye needs. She follows up with blazing fire magic, smashing the monster into the ground before relentlessly attacking until she finally exposes its magic core. Without wasting a second, she charges in with her lance technique and shatters the core, defeating the beast. But while celebrating too early, another Blaze Kong attacks her from behind with a burst of fire. Lewis instantly blocks the attack with his ice shield before countering with a single icy strike that drops the monster. Faye quickly thanks him, but Lewis notices something terrifying. The defeated monster starts moving again and unleashes another fire burst. He grabs Faye and dodges the attack just in time, leaving everyone stunned as the monster completely regenerates. King can't believe what he's seeing. Meanwhile, Lewis realizes this strange power feels exactly like the aura Neil displayed during their duel. Elsewhere, Derek is also battling multiple Blaze Kongs and can't understand how they're healing either. If this continues, the students won't survive. Back on Lewis's side, the monsters completely surround the group, leaving no route of escape. Kara and Miljana collapse from exhaustion, while Brain secretly regains consciousness and smirks to himself, saying everything is going according to plan. Now the monsters will finish Lewis for him. As if things weren't bad enough, the Blaze Kongs suddenly become even stronger and begin covering themselves in arcane armor. Lewis, Kane, and Faye barely dodge their attacks before Lewis notices they're all targeting him specifically. The 5 monsters surround him at once, combine their flames into one massive fireball, and launch it directly at him. And Brain smiles, convinced the mission is finally complete. But when the smoke clears, Lewis is still standing. He covered his entire body with an ice aura and blocked the attack. Kane is left speechless, realizing Lewis is controlling magic over such a massive area using pure mental power, something only masters are capable of. Faye can hardly believe how strong he's become. Lewis quietly admits to himself that by accelerating his mana circulation, he temporarily reached master-level control, but the strain on his body is pushing him to the limit, so he has to end the fight fast. He unleashes his ice-breathing technique, filling the battlefield with countless ice spears before charging forward and dropping one Blaze Kong with a crushing kick. Another monster immediately attacks from behind, but Lewis dodges with incredible speed, weaving between his enemies while continuously using his ice techniques. As he avoids their attacks, he activates his 8 trigrams technique, disrupting the monster's movements and preventing them from properly fighting back. He then finishes everything with his chain palm technique, wiping out every remaining Blaze Kong in one overwhelming attack. Brain is completely stunned that Lewis defeated the entire pack alone, while Kane and Faye can only stare in amazement. Lewis quietly notes that both wind and water magic feel much easier to control than before. Kane says he never imagined ice magic could become this powerful, but Faye cuts the conversation short, warning everyone they need to leave before even more monsters arrive. Lewis calmly reassures her that the teachers have already reached the area. Watching from a distance, Brain grits his teeth, frustrated that Lewis escaped death once again. Soon after, the principal orders every teacher to prioritize defeating the remaining monsters and rescuing the students. The instructors quickly spread across the battlefield, checking on everyone. The principal asks Lewis's group if they're all right, and Kane and Faye explain that they only survived because Lewis single-handedly defeated several master-level Blaze Kongs. However, Lewis tells the principal that the entire incident feels far too unnatural to be a coincidence. The principal agrees it's suspicious and orders them back to the academy while the teachers handle the rest. Later, Lewis visits a shop to buy healing potions, where Kylie approaches him and asks to speak privately. As they walk, she reveals that the headmaster examined the monster's remains and discovered traces of magical modification. Lewis's suspicion was correct. Someone intentionally engineered this attack. Kylie confirms that the headmaster believes enemy forces are behind it. With the emperor growing old and no successor officially chosen, several factions have become impatient. If they want to eliminate rival candidates, targeting their supporters makes perfect sense. Since the Academy is one of the Empire's greatest powers, every decision it makes from now on could change the balance of power. Lewis silently disagrees, believing the real target wasn't the Academy at all. The monsters were clearly targeting him specifically. Kylie promises she'll continue investigating and help however she can, but tells Lewis he must become even stronger and live up to the headmaster's expectations. After drinking his healing potion, Lewis heads off to reunite with Kane and Faye, more determined than ever to become the strongest. Meanwhile, Brain reports everything to his father, Prince Vaughn. He explains that although the monster's combat abilities were successfully enhanced, the results fell far below expectations because the Academy recovered several monster remains, and the headmaster has likely discovered the truth. Prince Vaughn calmly tells his son not to worry because the modified monsters were supplied by the Butan Empire, leaving the headmaster with no evidence to act on. The conversation then shifts to Lewis. Brain reveals that Lewis is the cursed child, something he confirmed after sensing Lewis's terrifying aura, and that the principal is secretly helping hide his identity. Brain warns that Lewis will definitely interfere with their future plans. Prince Vaughn simply smiles and orders Brain to report everything to the higher-ups of the Arcanist Association. Using the goddess's protection as cover, they'll make sure Lewis is eliminated. After all, the enemy of their enemy is an ally, so they'll remove Lewis without exposing themselves. The scene shifts back to the training grounds, where Lewis is sparring against the entire group. Kane attacks from multiple directions, but Lewis effortlessly dodges every strike. Right then, Faye rushes in with a powerful spear attack. Kane smoothly steps aside, letting Faye's strike connect, and although Lewis blocks it, the impact forces him backward. A split second later, Kara fires a flaming arrow that explodes on contact. Kane and Faye grin, convinced their teamwork finally worked, but Miliana quickly tells them not to celebrate yet because they're fighting Lewis. Sure enough, Lewis walks out of the smoke completely unharmed. He praises everyone's improvement, saying Kara has mastered hit-and-run tactics. Faye's spear techniques have become much stronger, and, most importantly, Miliana cleverly used earth magic to hide Kara's position. He admits it was an excellent strategy and says everyone is growing at an incredible pace. If he hadn't sensed their plan in advance using his detection technique, they might have actually caught him. Kane can't believe Lewis escaped without a scratch, while Faye is fascinated by his ability to sense an opponent's movements through energy, something she's never even heard of before. Lewis explains that it's a technique based on the circulation of spirit and magic. He's still researching it, but once he perfects it, he'll teach everyone. As Lewis reaches for another recovery potion, Miliana suddenly smiles and says it feels like he's not even from this world. Startled, Lewis asks why she would say that. Miliana explains that he freely shares his knowledge and techniques with everyone, while most people keep those secrets locked within their families. Lewis simply laughs and says maybe it's because he grew up as a commoner. He learns plenty from his friends too, so he believes it goes both ways. More than anything, he wants all of them to become stronger together. Faye then reminds everyone to head back and get some rest because they have martial arts class the next day. After the others leave, Lewis notices he's almost out of recovery potions and decides he'll need to buy more. Just as he's about to drink one, Kylie suddenly stops him. She points out that he already drank one yesterday and warns that constantly relying on recovery potions will eventually destroy his body. Lewis calmly replies that there are things he absolutely has to accomplish, and becoming stronger is the only way. As long as he's careful, he'll be fine because the potions let him train twice as long. The moment he drinks it, Kylie suddenly senses a terrifying aura erupt from Lewis. Instinctively, she summons her armor, shocking even Lewis, who has no idea what's happening. Kylie quickly calms herself down before noticing just how many recovery potions Lewis has been using. After checking the records, she's horrified to discover he's been drinking at least 2 potions every single day. Lewis insists it's the only way he can reach the level of Grandmaster, and since he feels perfectly fine, there's nothing to worry about. Frustrated, Kylie argues that becoming a Grandmaster starts with mastering the fundamentals, not endlessly consuming recovery potions. Even if he feels normal, she believes his body must already be suffering internally. She orders him to come with her, all while secretly deciding she also needs to report the mysterious aura she sensed to the principal. Later, inside the principal's office, the principal carefully examines Lewis and is shocked to find no trace of recovery potion damage anywhere in his body. Instead, Lewis's mana flow has actually become smoother than before. Kylie insists she definitely felt that terrifying aura, and the principal admits her report is concerning. Since Lewis's magic has increased so dramatically, it could have been a form of enlightenment, or perhaps another unique trait of the cursed child. Even so, he admits he doesn't fully understand what's happening and warns against jumping to conclusions. Kylie refuses to let it go, insisting there's definitely something abnormal inside Lewis. The principal explains that both alchemy and magic potions are still poorly understood, so nobody truly knows how they affect the human body. Meanwhile, Lewis isn't paying much attention because he's busy thinking about how alchemy works in this world. He realizes alchemists simply fuse materials together without separating their individual components first, causing unnecessary reactions. If the useful ingredients could be extracted individually before being recombined, They should be able to create far higher quality potions while identifying exactly which ingredients cause harmful side effects. After hearing Lewis's theory, the principal gathers the equipment Lewis requested, leaving Kylie completely confused about what he's planning. Lewis simply smiles and tells her she'll understand soon enough. A short while later, he successfully creates the potion exactly as he imagined. The principal is left speechless after watching Lewis extract every single component before refining them into a superior potion. Amazed by his talent, the principal invites Lewis to study alchemy under him, believing he could someday surpass even the legendary Lady Million. Lewis happily accepts the offer, while Kylie can only wonder if this guy has any weaknesses at all. Later that night, Lewis studies books explaining how potions are made from natural plants. As he reflects on the fact that plants require both fertile soil and water to grow, he realizes that earth and water together represent the origin of life. Suddenly, a brilliant green aura surrounds him, leaving both the principal and Kylie stunned. The principal immediately recognizes it as another moment of enlightenment. Before their eyes, Lewis creates living trees through magic alone. The principal can hardly believe what he's witnessing. Lewis explains that by combining water to provide moisture with fertile earth, he can instantly create new life. He names this newly discovered power the wood element. Fascinated, Kylie reaches out to touch one of the plants, but it suddenly transforms into a monster and attacks her. She effortlessly destroys it, then realizes Lewis didn't just create plants. He instantly turned them into living weapons, making his potential growth almost limitless. Lewis smiles and says that's still not the wood element's greatest ability. Its true strength lies in healing. The principal immediately wonders if the real foundation of recovery potions has always been the power of the wood element. Lewis believes that could very well be true, explaining that the biggest difference between ordinary plants and recovery potions is how elemental energy is contained within them. Excited by the discovery, the principal decides to provide Lewis with all the potion ingredients he needs for future research. But before they begin, he reminds Lewis that in the human world, strength alone cannot change fate. Looking him in the eyes, the principal asks whether Lewis truly seeks the power to change that destiny. The scene shifts to a hidden cave, where Lewis is experimenting with his newly awakened wood element. The principal is amazed that they managed to grow such a rare medicinal plant in such a short time. But Lewis explains that the rarer the plant, the more magic power it requires, and this is currently his limit. The principal praises him for purifying recovery potions, reducing their side effects, and even creating entirely new potions with the wood element, calling it an achievement that only Lewis could accomplish. He then says it's time to test the potions in real combat, because if Lewis truly wants to become stronger quickly, there's no better training than fighting him directly. Lewis eagerly accepts the challenge. After drinking one of his newly developed recovery potions, he charges in with everything he's got, while the principal unleashes his full power. Watching the clash, Kylie can only shake her head, convinced both of them are completely insane. Sometime later, Lewis reflects on the fight and realizes the principal never held back. Without the new potions he created, he would have been seriously injured. Already thinking ahead, he starts wondering what kind of potion he should invent next. Just then, Kara notices one of the potions and asks where it came from. Lewis casually says the principal gave it to him, but Kara immediately narrows his eyes and says it's obvious Lewis is the one who actually made it. Lewis tries to deny it for a moment before finally admitting the truth. Kara reveals that the principal already told him everything, but Lewis asks him to keep it a secret. Kara agrees and presents Lewis with a contract. He explains that if the trading company sells the potions instead, nobody will discover Lewis is the real creator. The principal has already discussed the business side with him, and this arrangement will protect Lewis while allowing the company to handle distribution. Lewis realizes Kara can provide all the materials he needs for future research, but he adds two conditions before agreeing. First, the potions sold to the public must have slightly weaker effects to avoid attracting unnecessary attention. Second, the trading company must financially support the orphanage where Lewis grew up. If Kara accepts both conditions, Lewis will cooperate. Kara immediately updates the contract, and the two officially form an alliance. Before leaving, Lewis even shares several business ideas with Kara. After Lewis walks away, It's revealed that Kara is actually a girl in disguise. A little later, two of her subordinates secretly enter her room and ask what Lady Kara needs from them. She shows them the contract, leaving both of them stunned by how many special privileges Lewis has been given. One of them points out that if this business succeeds, the Candice Trading Company could become one of the most powerful companies in the Eastern region, praising Lady Kara as a genius. Kara simply smiles and says the entire strategy was actually Lewis's idea, shocking them even more. One subordinate worries that Lewis might eventually support another royal heir instead, but Kara ignores the concern and gives them a new mission. She orders them to quietly take control of the Rashera orphanage before anyone notices. As her subordinates leave, Kara looks out the window and quietly says she has to move her plans forward because she wants to see Lewis's true potential. The story then jumps to the Academy's midterm examinations. The exams are divided into two parts: the technical exam and the combat exam. The first challenge is the infamous corridor of traps, also known as the nightmare of the technical exam, where students must survive countless traps and monsters without using martial arcane. Not a single student has ever achieved a perfect score. Faye finishes with 300 points, but fails the course. Kane earns 320 points and also fails. Miliana scores 250, Kara gets 290, and even Neil only manages 330 points. Derek shouts at everyone to give it their all, or he'll make their training even harsher. Finally, it's Lewis's turn. Derek confidently tells another professor that Lewis will probably score around 600 points, surprising everyone nearby. The moment Lewis enters, every trap activates at once. He immediately uses his void calculation technique, analyzing the flow of mana to detect every incoming attack before effortlessly dodging them. More traps activate, but with incredible agility, he escapes every one. Then a gigantic slime appears and attacks from every direction. As Lewis dodges, the slime's attacks split into even smaller slimes, while fireballs suddenly begin raining down as well. Surrounded from every side, Lewis realizes the amount of information is overwhelming and will take time to process. But no matter how complicated the situation becomes, as long as he can read the flow of mana, he knows there has to be an answer. Once his calculations are complete, he discovers the perfect escape route. Gracefully weaving through every attack, he causes the traps, fireballs, and slimes to destroy each other instead. The professors are left speechless. They can't believe Lewis cleared every obstacle without taking a single hit, while defeating both the monsters and the traps at the same time. Derek immediately realizes Lewis is about to shatter the Academy's record. Moving deeper into the course, Lewis encounters a swarm of incredibly fast bat monsters. Instead of chasing them, he punches the ground, launching rocks and debris into the air and using them as projectiles to knock the bats out one after another. Once again, the professors can only stare in disbelief. When the final scores are announced, Lewis earns an unbelievable 999 points, breaking the Academy's all-time record and claiming first place. The noble students are completely stunned, while Kane, Miliana, and Faye rush over to congratulate him. Neil silently glares at Lewis before walking away. Kane believes Neil has finally accepted the gap in strength between them, but Lewis calmly says that's not true. Neil isn't the type to give up that easily. Next comes the combat exam, where students are divided into different groups. Lewis and Kane end up separated, while Miliana is placed on Lewis's team. Her first opponent is an upperclassman, but Lewis encourages her not to worry about who she's facing and to fight with everything she has. Meanwhile, Kane is matched against Faye, and the matchup everyone has been waiting for is finally revealed: Neil versus Lewis. With the stage set for another explosive showdown, Derek steps forward and announces the start of the combat exam.